Hi, I'm Whitney Espick, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
Welcome, everyone. Hello, I am delighted to welcome you all to this month's MIT Alumni Forum. I'm Anvisha, I'm MIT class of 2014. I am the founder and CTO at Dover, and I am very excited to be moderating this panel today, celebrating alumni in leadership roles. Joining us now are three alums whose career journeys make them a perfect fit to speak to today's theme of women and leadership. First, we have Diane Hoskins, class of 1979, CEO at Gensler. Next, Rudena Abdo, class of 1990, CEO of The Key. And finally, Colleen Akehurst, a master's alum from 2004, managing director of Payne Schwartz Partners. It's a really awesome and inspiring group of people here. You will find more about each of us on the MIT Alumni Forum website. Another kind of really important participant in today's event is you all, the audience. We really do want you to join in the dialogue. We're going to keep it pretty interactive, and we're going to have a couple of ways of interaction here today. First off, there's a lot of stuff we wanted to cover, and so we're going to ask you a couple of times throughout this panel what you prefer us talking about. So there's going to be some choice points where we'll ask you to vote on what topic you'd like us to cover. Second, we know there's a lot of women leaders with us here tonight, so we're going to end the evening with breakout rooms. That means we're going to break off into small groups where we can kind of have a more intimate chat, and instructions for that will come up at the end of the session. And finally, please use the Q&A tool in the Zoom toolbar. I'm going to be monitoring it, and we'll see what comes up and kind of pose those questions to our panelists. With that said, and with the logistics out of the way, I think that we are ready to get started here. Cool. Well, I think it'd be really great for the people listening if we can maybe start by hearing something briefly about what we studied when we were at MIT and what we're doing these days. I can kick us off. So I studied course 6, computer science. And then today I am the CTO at Dover. We are a startup. We are the first recruiting orchestration platform. What that means is that we help companies be more efficient, more bias-free in their recruiting process. We have about 200 customers today and 65 full-time employees spread across the US and Canada. We've raised $23 million to date from Y Combinator, Tiger Global, and Founders Fund. It's just been a really amazing learning journey, and I'm excited to share more about it with you all today. Next, I'm going to hand off to Colleen. Colleen, we'd love to hear a little bit about what you studied and what you're up to now.
Sure, thanks. Really excited to be here with everyone this evening or this morning, depending on where you are. So I graduated in 2004 with a master's degree in the technology and policy program, one of the few departments at MIT that doesn't have a course number. And I have spent the last bit of my career after graduating from MIT, mostly in industry, large food businesses, and then recently joined a private equity firm in New York City that invests in the sustainable food supply chain. So taking my practical operator and consulting skills and helping really exciting businesses grow. So looking forward to hearing from my fellow panelists and also connecting with folks in the audience.
Awesome. Oh. Thank you. Thank you, Colleen.
Yep.
Rudena, we'd love to hear from you next.
Thanks, Anvisha, and lovely to be here and to see everyone. I studied course 4, architecture, and for first 25 years-ish, and then went on to urban planning elsewhere. But had about 25-year career in urban planning, but about 7 years ago, I did a pivot and started my own nonprofit, which is a circular economy model of bringing digital literacy and e-learning to refugee and vulnerable communities, vulnerable children in the Middle East. So that's been my life and my passion for the last 7 years, actually.
Thanks, Rudena. You're so inspiring. And last but not least, Diane, would love to hear from you.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here with everyone. What a great conversation that's kicking off here. So I also studied course 4, which is architecture. And, since we're talking about the topic of leadership and, being women leaders, I just thought I would mention, when I went to MIT, and again, I graduated in '79, it was really dominantly male at MIT. It was, in fact, a ratio of about 11 guys to each woman, which, just is kind of crazy to even imagine. And, I would say I didn't even know places like that existed. I don't know if I'd have gone if I knew that was going to be the case. But I mean, it's an incredible opportunity. But fast forward to today. So I lead the largest architecture firm in the world, Gensler. We have 50 offices around the world, over 6,000 people. But just to, put my role in perspective, there are only 3 firms in the top 100 architecture firms in the world that have a woman leader. So it's really interesting when I look at my MIT experience and then I look at even where I am today and all the points along the way. I feel like I've kind of always been in this kind of threshold place where you're starting to begin to see more women, but where it really is in that transformational moment. And, I really have been very conscious of that and have found myself really inserting myself into the role of being an agent of change and mentoring women and making sure that there are, opportunities that are even more abundant than when I got there.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's a really crazy stat of like what MIT ratio looked like back in the day. Well, I'd love to, kick off this discussion. I mean, there's obviously a lot to talk about. I think to kick things off, the 4 of us had the opportunity to chat the other day. And one of the kind of topics that kind of kept coming up was we're living through some really weird times. There isn't a rule book for what to do when there's a global pandemic, especially when it comes to leadership. I would love to hear about how you're each thinking about leadership now and what's changed for you from 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. I can jump in if that's okay. Yeah. Interestingly, well, COVID, everybody changed all over the world, but we were already working in very much in a remote, no office scenario since I started. My team has always been in different places. So that was not the big issue for us, for me, with leading the team. But it was, I'd say the biggest thing was meeting people where they are. And everything falling on, it's a small team that we have, but it's a young team as well. So lots of the young children. So meeting them where they need to be and to handle everything. And also assessing what are real deadlines and artificial ones from within and from outside. Because we escalated being in the EdTech arena and working with remote communities that were marginalized and even cut off from educational opportunities in the work where we work in Lebanon predominantly at that time. We really had to act very quickly, and we were one of the early ones who were adopting and bringing learning with WhatsApp because you didn't have access to technology. And we learned at that point that almost half of the world was not connected, and that's definitely the demographic that we're dealing with. So it was a huge acceleration to address these circumstances that we're dealing with. And so the work just became crazy, but how managing the team to allow them to do what they can at that time. And that still is the ethos that has continued. So it's very flexible. It always has been flexible. And this is definitely something that we'll carry forward. So and that's very much valued and appreciated, actually.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off there, Dania. So I think it's interesting because, my experience was slightly different, where we had always been, the different roles I had heading into the pandemic and through the pandemic, more office-based. And so it was quite the flip. And so I think about it as, there was always a trend towards authenticity. I think heading into the pandemic, I think the experience of folks who had been working in offices, then doing it all via Zoom and seeing cats and dogs and children and life happen because they were in their homes or in other spaces. I think it increased, I think from a leadership perspective, but from a connectivity perspective, which is certainly a key part of leadership, it drove it in a different way that, authentic leadership was critical. I think it became, it got redefined, I guess is the best way to describe it, during the pandemic. And it's exciting to see it continue now that, at least for me in my current role, we're heading back into offices, but there's this connectivity that we all have that didn't necessarily exist heading into the pandemic.
Pauline, as you're heading back into, just to quickly follow up there, as you're heading back into office, I'm curious, like what people's reaction has been to, going back to like pre-pandemic, back to the office.
I think it's a couple of things. One is there's this wonderful, oh, great, we're back together and we're, enjoying having meetings. And there's this, I think folks missed it because there were fits and starts of trying to get back together and it not happening the way folks expected. I shared with a couple of folks, I was actually at a large conference just 2 weeks ago with 30,000 people in California. And it was the first big conference, obviously, I had attended, and I think most anyone there had attended in over 2 years. And so I think going back to offices was exciting. I'm in a smaller office. There's, a couple of dozen of us. Going to a conference was a whole new experience because that was unlike anything I had experienced in 2 years or any of us had. And it was a combination of wonderful, we're back, and am I really comfortable doing this? And is this what we're going back to? Or are we just going back to where we were? And I'll be honest, I'm not sure I've fully digested and kind of synthesized all of that. But it's a short answer, I guess, Anvisha, is combination of emotions as we're going back.
Yeah, just to kind of add into this, and I couldn't agree more with that authenticity side of it. I would also say, so there's this kind of thing that is with your internal stakeholders, and then from our external stakeholders, our clients that are global. I think it changed our relationship with our clients. There was a real heightened need for what do we need, what are we going to do? And coming to us and asking us, what is your research saying? What do you guys suggest? Where is this all going? In fact, that continues right now. Like, what is the future of cities? What is the future of workplace? As architects who design all those kinds of things, again, we're right in the middle of that vortex. So this incredible opportunity actually to really bring very cutting edge ideas to clients, kind of fresh off the table, not necessarily things that have even been tried, but really getting out there with some pretty unique ideas and frankly, clients who may not have ever been interested in doing something totally untested were interested in doing things and trying. And this idea of experimenting is frankly something that now is pervasive in design, especially workplace design, as you're talking about, Colleen. Our clients are looking at hybrid. What does hybrid mean for us? How do we do some betas? How do we test ideas? I think it is opening up an incredible moment of innovation, certainly in the design of space. I think we're all kind of questioning what is, the purpose of our cities, what's the purpose of our workplaces, all these kinds of places. I think it also has underscored the importance of place. But I want to also kind of pivot to another part of this pandemic journey, which is also about inclusion and about diversity and about what happened, with the George Floyd moment. As a CEO and as a CEO of color, all of a sudden, there was a very different kind of relationship that I had with my staff. I needed to speak to them about race. I needed to speak to them about what was happening out on the streets. And I had to talk about what our firm was going to be doing. That was never something I was doing as a CEO before that moment. But ever since that happened, my role in the organization actually is also all about DEI, is also about being part of fighting racism. And frankly, it's been, phenomenal in terms of, I always kind of wondered, well, what's next? Boy, what next definitely came. And, it's been exciting. It's been, frankly, challenging in a way that I'd never experienced before. But I'm thrilled and proud to be able to be more authentic and be in a whole different kind of conversation, and also unlock, a different kind of level of community and connection among the people in our organization.
Diane, and I'm especially curious. I mean, you lead the largest architecture firm in the world. Like that's a lot of people. How do you how do you support people that are like probably very diverse and different within the firm?
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally a creative organization needs to be about individuality. And so that has always been a critical part of how we think about how we're organized. And, I'm sure in all of your organizations, it's about innovation. It's about how to get those best ideas out there. And that means people have to be, it comes from individuals and then kind of, the collaboration of diverse ideas and diverse people. And so, that has always been kind of underneath it all, but it's become much more the top conversation. And how do we really ensure that our teams are diverse? How do we amp up? Frankly, I think we looked at our own diversity and said, look, we are diverse enough in certain areas, and bringing much more intentionality around that as well across our entire organization.
Awesome. We do have some questions popping up. So let's take one of these right here. There's a question from Karen. How readily do men in your industries accept you and other women as leaders? Are there any who don't? Has it changed in the past decade or two? And is there anything you do to help on this front? That's a great question.
So I guess I'll go, and I think I wear two hats, and I'll talk to one, like I said, I've spent most of my career in industry at large consumer goods companies. I recently, during the pandemic, actually transitioned into private equity and financial services. So I think I'll talk to the first one because that's the space I know better. And having worked in that industry actually since undergrad, even before going to MIT for my graduate degree, that it has changed significantly in 20 years and changed for the better. There were definitely folks, I started my career in manufacturing, working on a shop floor, that leading a whole team of gentlemen and being one of the few women given an engineering undergraduate degree. That's not, that's still typical, but it's not, I wasn't as rare as I would if I were doing it today as I was when I graduated from undergrad 20 some odd years ago. I think in the consumer goods industry, it's a unique industry that actually has seen a number of female CEOs in high profile companies, but we hadn't always seen the diversity at all levels of the organization. And I have seen that get better. To Diane's point, for those of us who are fortunate to be in wonderful leadership positions at stages of our career, it is about making sure that there are opportunities for everyone to join in a conversation and to get development and to continue to evolve and grow in their careers, whatever that might be. So for some of us, it is ascending a ladder of sorts in a corporate role. For others, it's about starting their own businesses. And so I think it is about mentoring and developing and investing time. For me, like I think for the other panelists, there is an over-indexing to supporting women in that regard. And so I think short answer is it is getting better. The unfortunate answer is it's not perfect yet. There is still work to be done every day.
Yeah. If I can jump in here, Colleen, very much agree with that. And interestingly, Diane, when I was in an architecture course for MIT mid-80s, so a little bit behind you, it was a third females, women to men, and architecture was closest to par to being 50-50. I think it was 48% women in architecture. But then in my career was North America. I'm actually, by the way, probably the only international here. I'm in the Netherlands right now, so it's late in the, or early in the middle of the night. So my career has been mostly international, and in urban planning, I was in the a lot of it in the last few years, the last decade and a half was in the Middle East. So definitely a lot of male domination in leadership, but very much opening up to the role of female leadership. And in education and higher education, interestingly, I think we're in the 70th percent of female of women going towards higher degrees, and we're now starting to see it more and more. And now that I've moved into the education arena, it is very much women in it and women leadership moving into it. That is moving a lot slower, I'm finding. And also being in the entrepreneurial startup scene, funding towards women-led organizations is really lagging. So I think, and I think that's probably across the board in a lot of startups. So a lot more work to be done, but we're definitely much more present, I think, today than we were a decade and two ago.
Yeah, definitely to add on to the startup bit. For me, as in tech, as an entrepreneur, I've worked in companies where I'm the only woman in the room, and it's just something that I got desensitized to very early on, which was different from my MIT experience. Actually, even in course 6, we had a pretty, kind of, I don't know the exact numbers, but we had a lot of women in course 6. And I think part of it is just getting desensitized to it. I also think that there's kind of been this moment of reckoning in tech that's been going on for a couple of years, especially as it relates to female entrepreneurs, where there were a lot of practices when it comes to investors and VCs that were kind of called out in a very public way. And so I am definitely seeing a shift, receptiveness, and a lot of change and wanting to encourage more female entrepreneurship. Y Combinator has done a lot of this. I mean, it's still a lot to be gained. And again, in the room, if you look around, there's just not that many women, even in Y Combinator, but they are really, really trying. And so I think that's helped a lot.
Yeah, and I'll just add in, I think that the numbers of women that graduate in architecture are definitely at a high level. It's when people get into practice and you really start to see it pretty dramatically when we look at, licensure levels, when we look at, fellowship levels, when we look at leadership of the firms. That's where the numbers, severely drop off. And then we go into our sister community of construction, and it is, very much a place where women are really just beginning to show up as, leaders within some of those organizations. And then, again, women on the job sites are not common. And I think we all know that, it's still a place where we have to be focused on making sure that our voice is understood and that, respected when you're giving direction on the job site. And, again, these are all things that, I am so proud of the women that I work with and the way that they have grown and the way that I, again, see the efforts we make at Gensler to make sure that opportunity is there across gender, across backgrounds, but it definitely is still a place where, especially in real estate and construction, where we have to be very intentional.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks again, Karen, for that great question. We're actually going to quickly dip into our first poll. Obviously there's a lot to talk about. So I'm going to turn to the audience now to have you kind of pick your own adventure. There should be a pop-up that comes up. There's 2 questions in there. Let's give everyone maybe a few 20 seconds here to respond. First question is, hop in a time machine. What advice do you give to yourself at age 20, knowing what you know now? Second question is, how has MIT changed since you were a student? Unfortunately, I can't vote. I wish I could, but.
Are we allowed to sway the audience? Can we try?
all bets are off. Okay, I think we're closing our poll now. Great. Okay. Wow. So 75% of people would like to hear what advice you would give yourself at age 20, knowing what you know now. Who would like to kick us off?
Oh, I'll start that one. I would love to tell myself you can't get it wrong. I think I've worried about career decisions and choices about taking this role, making this move. What does it imply? What doors does it open? What doors does it close? I have, as I've already mentioned, pivoted my career a couple of times. I think everyone on this panel has, I think folks in the audience have as well, that I wish I had known that, enjoy, it's a version of enjoy the journey, but you can't get it wrong. Make the decision, move on. If it works, great. If it doesn't, you pivot and keep going, but you don't get it wrong. You can't get it wrong.
I think, Holly, that really resonates with me as well. If I can jump in here, Afshina, I was going to say, for me, it's stop overthinking it, and don't wait for all the stars to align and have all of the details in place. Just go there and do it, and also pick up a hobby and perfect a hobby. That would be the other advice I would give myself as a 20-year-old self. But think through the details, but just don't jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I love the hobby thing because that's the hardest part. I don't know. I mean, I think, again, and I think I mentioned in some of our prep, MIT for me was an experience where, you had to move fast, you had to run hard, you had to get things done. I felt like I came out of there like a house on fire, and I still haven't stopped. So I think in some respects, kind of slowing it down a little bit afterward would have probably been good, because, it's, but I guess I learned how to just kind of love learning. And, I don't know that I'd ever want to trade that in.
Yeah, it's interesting how, like, I agree with everything that you all said, and I can particularly resonate with the bit about, like, hey, it's going to be okay. Like, things are going to work out. Just because you pick, decision A over decision B, or like, make a particular decision doesn't mean that you're really like pruning your future in in a significant way. I think a lot of, I feel, I look back now and I'm like, I'm so happy where I'm at. Like, even though, there's probably some micro decisions that I made over the course of this time that like may not have been the wisest move, but then I wouldn't have ended up where I am now. And I think, I would have definitely told a younger version of me to chill out a little bit. It's a theme that I'm noticing here in this conversation coming up with a lot of us, which is kind of funny. Yeah.
Yeah, and the chill out part, also learn how to have fun, which is why I also thought maybe I wish I joined the team sport, because I'm very good at doing, go out and doing things, and team sport I think would have carried on very well with me over time.
So can I ask you what hobby you have started or wish you had started? Am I allowed to know what hobby?
You see, I wish I haven't.
For inspiration, I'll be honest.
Well, I haven't started, but I would like to get into olive oil, understand olives and olive oil in particular. Not maybe wine, but olive oil. So maybe we should talk in about 5 years, and you see if I'm accountable and have done anything about that.
Or I'm not holding you accountable. Again. We'll just join the journey trying olive oils for the next 5 years.
Exactly.
Love that hobby. Awesome. Well, I think we probably have time for one more question from the audience here. So many good questions in here. Yeah, so here's a great one, actually. Carol Ann asks, she's a recent Arch grad from course 4, course 4 representation. How does one promote open conversations about gender equality, diversity, and inclusion when we're in very junior positions and may not feel like we have a lot of agency to do so because of a lack of experience in the field? It's a great question.
I'll just jump in. I frankly love when our young staff you know, just raise their voice. And I've talked to leaders of large firms, you know, we have a large firm roundtable, and I would just assure you that people are interested in what you're saying, and frankly, really would value and grow from your raising your voice and bringing your perspective. You know, I know in our organization, it's been fantastic to help people feel comfortable enough, no matter what role they're in. And some of the most interesting and important conversations are coming from, you know, the youngest generation. So I just encourage you to you know, have those discussions.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Being in a smaller organization, but even when I was in larger organizations, finding the place also to be heard. If it's fine, it may not be the larger group meeting, the massive meeting with the whole town hall with everybody, but find yourself where to be heard. And as a leader, make sure you're listening to where the voices are quiet. These are, as a leader, that's where you really should be paying attention to, those who don't speak up as much.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's an importance of finding the space and the place and finding the people. That there, you know, as Diane pointed out, there are more receptive ears than I think I would have known as I was more junior in my career. That you know, if we're talking about gender specifically, that there were male colleagues who wanted to support younger women coming up and were not just mentors, but became sponsors that enabled my career to unfold the way it did. And I think finding those, whether we call them allies, whether we call them mentors, whether we call them sponsors, there are, you know, what we're all hearing is women are supporting women, but there, you know, the number of wonderful supportive men that I've had nurturing my career is just countless, and I'm grateful. So finding that, whether it's for your career or for changing a workplace dynamic, that there are good people in every organization that any of us have ever or will ever work in, and that's your first step.
You know, and I want to echo that, because one thing I want to also recognize is, like, a lot of times the burden falls onto women to do the work and you know, push for these conversations, and actually, like, finding allies, like, across the organization really kind of, like, helps ease that burden and, like, make progress. And I definitely echo that. I mean, for me, the situations where I've been able to work with people who also care have been phenomenal. I recognize you don't find that in every organization, but trying to not do everything on your own, like it can be a burden to just try to do everything on your own and try to always, you know, kind of be the only person bringing it up.
Yeah. And, you know, some organizations have formal mentorship programs and others just don't. But in both cases, make yourself available to be a mentor if you want to, if you would like to take somebody on, and the other way around. If you are somebody who's looking to somebody in particular, don't be afraid to ask for that mentorship and advice. It's also honoring. I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't be turned back. I would be very surprised if you would not be embraced in that.
We might actually take a couple more questions here. So here's actually something that hasn't really come up yet from BC. What are some of the building blocks that have been instrumental in enabling you to be the leaders of your organizations?
Wow.
Time for everyone to a little bit.
I think
it's funny.
So,
you know,
go for it.
Sorry,
please,
you know,
go. Yeah.
I'll just jump in. I mean, there'll be 1,000 things, but, you know, honestly, I really feel pretty strongly that it's the same things that enable you to be just great at what you do. I mean, it's loving what you do and, you know, understanding how other people fit into that vision, and being able to articulate that vision and frankly, you know, I find it's about kind of that collective and, you know, really coming together as a community, as a team, and being able to help, you know, organize the genius, but to realize the genius is in the people that, you're leading the team itself. And so to me, leadership, the key to leadership is really connecting with people and being able to unlock the greatness that's inside of them, and to build that shared vision, and then really to enable getting there.
Yeah, I think Diane, go for it, and Anisha.
Just really quick, echoing that, I think, especially in like kind of a technical field, starting out, it's like being good at the work and just being a good individual contributor helps kind of advance you in the organization. But I definitely feel like at a certain point, it's sort of, there's this shift that you have to make from like, hey, and there certainly is like an avenue for technical leadership as well, but even in technical leadership too, it's like being able to, really interact and understand people and help make people around you better is really like, I think the key ingredient, and caring about that, first of all, and then be able to do it. And for me, that's been actually like definitely a learning experience as someone who like, is an engineer, software engineer, and then just like wanted to build and ship things and like, get like build product, and then being like, okay, wow, like now it's like, that's actually not the most important thing anymore. It's like needing to empower other people, needing to kind of have more highly leveraged impact. And Colleen, I'd love to hear.
And I think when we combine both of your answers, it's like the perfect answer of early in your career, it's about being good at what you do and loving it, as Diane said, is critical. It helped enable me to succeed, that you demonstrate success results, and then you get into the leadership role, and it is about engaging people and helping others become are able to deliver more than they thought, and that collaborative vision. I think you're also hearing from us, and from the communication piece would be the additional build I would have, is whether you are starting out as communicating your ideas and your thoughts and your plans and your results of what you've done, that the communication changes as you become a leader, but learning how to describe the work you do, ask questions, provide perspective is critical day one of your career, and I assume it will be on the last day of my career many, many years from now. So continuing that building block is always important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything, and I think it's an escalation and increase in the emotional intelligence part of things, and on the softer skills as well, which become so critical, humility, humanity. And then that brings out the vulnerability and the authenticity, which we're probably more afraid to show when we're younger. And at least I'm finding that we're much more comfortable in expressing, and that brings also a different culture to an organization and to leadership.
That's great.
I do want to transition quickly back to a question that kind of we had sort of talked about when we met earlier this week. There's a lot of ways to evaluate what success looks like. One of the most kind of like common ways to evaluate success is like scale, this idea of scale, like, growing, being bigger, better. How has your definition of scale changed in the past few years? Rodina, I know you've kind of alluded to this in your work. Would you like to sort of start us off there?
Yeah, this is a tricky one for me. It's something I'm actually contemplating very much on the personal level, because it's, in the startup world and everything we've been involved with, it's all about scale, numbers, impact, bigger. And I've just been really grappling with this notion, if this is truly the way to measure the success that I want to see. Impact, absolutely, depth. But even when I, to be a little bit more philosophical about scale and thinking about, reflecting about, we just putting more out, more, always more, and thinking of a biomimicry notion of how nature does it. Nature doesn't do it that way necessarily. There's pause, there's rest, there's rejuvenation, there's retraction and regrowth going back. So, and I'm saying that because, I participate in these startup challenges and these accelerators, and you have to show this scale. But then, I mentioned I'm in the EdTech arena with vulnerable communities. And when I was going to the field, this was pre-COVID, and I did spend, I go into, one day I was in a classroom with 50 refugee children in that classroom, overcrowded conditions. And I realized, all of these wonderful initiatives and innovations that are coming in, but nothing can replace a human being sitting next to the child and guiding them through things. So some things are simply not scalable. And the organizations that are running these things are not getting the kind of funding that they should be, because they can't prove the scale that they need to. So, but this maybe is a bit of a tangent of an idea, but it's really got me thinking to what it's because sometimes when we fall into this game, it's as if it's scale it at all costs, and you just have to keep going. So the question I have to be honest with and ask myself, am I still doing the right thing? Am I just continuing for the sake of existing and pivoting for the sake of existing? So that is something that I question myself, and I keep coming back to.
I love
probably not the popular answer.
I love the question, and actually I love your perspective, because I do think that there's kind of scale. Another thing like that is speed, and these things start to be considered givens. And I think it's like anything else. We can't have kind of a one size fits all. When I think about scale and I think about my own organization, in design and in design firms, there start to be limitations when you're too small, and even in that middle zone. And what we have found that as we have gotten larger, we've been able to invest in research that really has unlocked innovation in our work. And we would have never had, those resources to invest in research, to invest in our communities, to be able to, do all sorts of things that, create benefits to, frankly, people, if we hadn't gotten to a certain scale. So there's kind of this, economies of scale world that we all kind of live in that, creates benefits and creates, if channeled the right way, unlock the possibility of things that don't need to return the same margin, but have incredible value at a different level. I mean, we started our whole research initiative, 12 years ago, and now is the Gensler Research Institute that we are, doing amazing, in fact, during the pandemic, all the work that we had done on the nature of work, and what is going on in the workplace became in massive demand. I think we were one of the first firms actually to do research on people who were working from home and starting to really get that conversation going about, the fact that there are some benefits and so forth, and it kind of took off. So I guess what I'm just kind of grappling with, and I love the challenge, because I do think there starts to be kind of the diminishing returns of scale. And I think our challenge as leaders is to, take scale and create benefits that actually are almost off balance sheet, because you can, take margin and put it toward things that frankly are not on an annual return, but actually are more, decades in terms of the kinds of impacts that we can begin to think about.
I guess I should put my private equity hat on, since I work in financial services, that scale is very much a mantra. And I think Diane, her comments on what's the purpose of scale. If it is financial profitability for a for-profit enterprise, that matters and that's important. But it's what is the impact of that scale around connectivity to consumers, customers, clients, all, that the stakeholder space is large. And so it is serving one goal at the exclusion of contemplating others is always a risk. Scale matters in many contexts, but it's not the perfect answer, I think, as we've just heard in these last few comments, in every situation. And so I think it's great, has a role to play. It's not the only answer for organizations having impact.
Yeah, and in my situation, when we were, before my company, we raised our Series A, my co-founders and I kind of had a conversation because we were actually profitable. We were like, okay, so should we go out and raise more money? Because if we do that, then, we're basically trying to scale. Or should we kind of keep a good thing going? And it was a tough conversation. And we really thought about it. And I think for me, it kind of just came down to like the skills that I felt like we had and that we were excited to develop, and the feeling that when something like software, like you can scale sustainably and make that impact. So it made sense. But I definitely think that there's like an alternate world where like it wouldn't make sense. And I think like having that conversation and being very deliberate about it is critical. And I love the thoughts that were shared here, Rodana, Diane, and Colleen. This is actually really interesting, a lot to think about. So we're actually sort of at time for the panel portion of this discussion. Obviously we could kind of keep chatting. We're going to be breaking out into the breakout room. So that information is going to come up on the screen very soon. And for those of us who are kind of leaving right now, thank you for joining us tonight. We're so glad you were here, and thank you so much for all the wonderful questions. We can definitely take those conversations and the questions that didn't get answered over to the breakout rooms. I guess before we get there, quick question from the MIT alumni folks who organized this event that's going to pop up in the chat. They're curious about which alumni programs you would like to see more of. So please go ahead and vote on that in the poll that comes up. And then kind of my last question for our panelists today is, what word or phrase are you saying to yourself these days to keep yourself focused, motivated, get through these tough times? I can kick us off. For me, I'm often telling myself to work myself out of a job. Someone had a question earlier about delegation and how it's hard for MIT alums that are just used to building things to delegate. That's definitely something that I've experienced. Especially as sort of our company has grown, it's like it's really something I need to remind myself of.
It's the thing that I don't know. This has definitely been the case as a new thought during COVID and all the things that I've experienced since through this whole journey of virtual, is that anyone can own the moment. And honestly, it's there for the taking. I've come to realize how close all of us are to any issue and any impact that we want to have. And, for me, that has been a massive revelation. And I kind of want to remind all of us that, any of us can own the moment on any issue and make a difference.
I love what you both said. I think for me, I would like to keep reminding myself to stay curious, and somewhat related to that, step forward and know when to step back as well, but stay curious.
Mine would be keep going. Uncertainty and chaos and craziness has been the day-to-day lives we've all been living for the last 2 years for reasons of pandemic and racial reckonings and many other things. And those are the broad ones. We all have had them in we've all had personal challenges that, global challenges aside, kept happening. That, I guess it's a simplification of the Winston Churchill, quote around, when you find yourself in hell, keep going, just keep going. And one every day.
So inspiring. Well, on that inspiring and awesome note, thank you all for this great discussion. It's been lovely for me personally to get to talk with all of you, and to the MIT Alumni organization for organizing this and putting this together. For everyone who joined us tonight, we've recorded this broadcast. You can find it on the MIT Alumni Forum page within a week. And if you have feedback about today's event, you will get a survey after this, and please kind of go ahead and fill it out. I think it's time for the breakout. So let's head over.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.